Hello, everybody. My name is Anita Delahaye. I am Head of Learning Science at Argos Education and Chief Research Officer. I've recorded a quick video here that can be watched ahead of our in-person time on Monday. The idea being that we can spend more time on the topics that are important to you when we meet face-to-face. I'm going to try to keep this brief. If I'm going a little fast, I apologize. I want to not use up too much of your time between now and then. What I've done is I've built a competency using Desire to Learn Brightspace and Argos Education. And we'll look at that in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and hide my panel here, hide the video panel, and then also hide my meeting controls so that we can focus on what's here. Throughout the video, I'm going to point out how Argos is well equipped to support CBL models and CBL learning. And to give you sort of an advanced organizer on that, I'll start by saying that Argos is built on a platform that has been in design and development cycles for 20 years or so at Carnegie Mellon University. And it's not incidental that this platform is ideal for mastery models. Decades of learning research at Carnegie Mellon have focused on, one, bringing novices to mastery through goal-aligned practice with targeted feedback. Two, using data to improve recommendations to learners and improve the course materials themselves. And three, all of this in the context of self-guided work on the part of the learner. Fundamentally, you can think of this as a tutor replacement system. So what you're looking at here, of course, is the D2L classroom set up as a competency sort of unit might be. The first thing that you'll see here is the project, which really, of course, is meant to give a student the idea of what they should be able to know and be able to do by the end of this particular competency. If I launch this unit, we can see that it has sort of a description of the project, instructions on what the project is going to be about. It's a scenario-based assessment where they'll review several documents and make a recommendation to their working group based upon what they've learned here. And then last but not least, of course, is the project rubric that shows them how they're going to be scored and really what they should be focusing on as they go about learning. The second unit here is broadly the learning resources. And this is the connection to the Argos platform that I'm going to launch here. This opens in a new window here. And before I talk about the LTI connection, I just want to say that the learning resources also will include the competency assessment. And we'll see that when we get there. And I'll explain why. But this is using LTI Advantage. So it has the benefit of knowing who I am when I get here. It knows that in this particular case, I'm a student, so it adjusts what I'm able to see and do in the Argos platform. It knows which materials I should see, and then on completion of and submission of my competency assessment, those scores, once they're graded, will be sent back to D2L. So here I've sort of designed this in, with sort of units that are tied to competencies. This unit can be hidden. It can be one competency and one assessment. It could be, 4 sub-competencies with an assessment at the end. It could be a whole specializations worth of competency. There's a lot of flexibility in how you want to design here. And these containers sort of give you that flexibility. But we're really going to focus on competency 1 here. And I'm going to click in as Doug's student. And I've been in this particular competency before, so you'll see that I've answered many of the practice problems and that I have the opportunity to practice as much as I'd like. We've included the same information about the competency assessment and rubric here for easy access. That's a design or policy decision whether you'd want to repeat that there. When I click next, I get into the content. I'll mention that I built this from an OpenStax textbook. I pulled a few units and pages that I thought I wanted to build a competency around. Argos has an OpenStax importer built in so that all of this material comes over easily without any effort on my part. I did a little bit of sort of segmenting and a little bit of design work, but really minimal. And so this was quite an easy build and author for me. The images, the text, The video references all came over, were included in the textbook, as well as even the captions here and the alt text and the questions. Of course, when it comes over in the OpenStax, that's a static question. What we're able to do here is to create a dynamic, active experience for the student. This first page is really just kind of an overview on the topic. And what I want to do here is I want to get the student engaging with the content right away. Active opportunities to practice have lots of advantages for students. First of all, it gives me an immediate sense. Did I get what I just read or not? Do I need to go back and read it, watch the video? It gives me a sense also of what the learning designer or the competency designer thought was important. The question really would target the most important information on the page. And there can be, of course, multiple questions and multiple types of questions. We'll see in just a moment. And then last but not least, cognitive research has done a lot of work on this notion of if I actively recall, if I actively practice what it is I've just learned, I'm better able to retain that and use it in important ways. So what I want to show here is, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to get this wrong, I think. Oh, no, I picked the one that was right. Sorry, let's do the one that was wrong first. So, when I designed this question, or the designer of this question, they had one response that was correct. This is a multiple choice, and 3 that were wrong. And, they can attune those wrong answers to common misconceptions, to common misunderstandings. And what this option for targeted feedback here, what I mean by that is, with that misconception in mind, I can let the student know that that was the incorrect choice. I can also give them a little information that redirects them or dispels that incorrect information, and I can encourage them to try again. And by targeted, I mean that I can write different feedback for every response. Now, this was the only part that I added to the OpenStax textbook that wasn't there natively. I can choose to do this or not do this. I can have a simple, select the answer that's correct in the authoring system, and the system will just generate correct and incorrect responses. So this is a little bit of extra work that doesn't have to be done. It really depends on how you want to set that up, how you want to set up your design. And we'll talk about it later, but it can be done at a later point. So we can review sort of the diagnostics for the activities in this course as a learning designer. And perhaps this one is relatively easy and students get it. And I don't want to sort of invest that time in making any embellishments on this particular activity. Perhaps it's one that's particularly difficult. And I think that adding the targeted feedback at a later time would be a useful way to help students learn. So I'm going to go as quickly as I can here because I want to show you a couple different things, both here as the student, but then also from the instructor view, and also as we'll look at how this gets authored and the data that's available on the course design as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but there are some nice features here to do terms. You can roll over and have that term be pronounced for the student. You can have a definition just in time there, which can be really helpful for self-guided learners. More multiple choice questions here. This is an example of a different type of question. We call it a submit and compare. And there are a couple ways to set it up where it's really checking the answer, where it's just checking that the student did the answer. But really, this is a little more sort of higher up the Bloom's chain, if you will, and that it's getting me to maybe synthesize or apply a little bit from what I read. And I can type my answer. So I'm going to type work-life balance. I can submit. I would hopefully answer in full sentences. But even if I didn't do that, I get the benefit of seeing how an expert would answer this question. So it gives me an opportunity to pause, to think for a second, to do something, and then to reap the rewards of that by getting a little more information. And this can simply restate information that I've already encountered. It can embellish or deepen that information and provide additional context and learning. So it's really a nice sort of self-guided, self-directed learner activity that's a little deeper than a multiple choice or true false. I have, questions after each section that really give me that ability to cement what I learned in that section, have signals about what's important, and take a pause to see, did I get that before I move on? And then, sort of more throughout that page. I'm going to show you one more page before we look at the competency assessment. These learning objectives are really here for the student to understand what they're going to be learning about on that page. As the author or the designer, I have the opportunity to attach learning objectives to practice problems as well. The student doesn't see that here, but that's a huge driver of the analytics and the learning on the backside. So we'll look at that when we get into the authoring view. But again, more multiple choice questions here. And then what I've done is at the very bottom here, after the summary, I have a submit and compare, but it's sort of a special one. This one is a little more integrative. It draws on material from the last 3 pages, multiple sections, and it's not as involved as the competency assessment I'm about to do, but it's a little bit in that direction. So it's preparing me for beginning to synthesize the materials from this competency into a whole. And so it's a little more similar to the competency assignment, but again, a very simple. So I'm going to write one word here. A very simple exercise that I can check, and I can have one more opportunity to really get a summary from the expert's view on what I should have learned and how I should be thinking about this. All right, so last but not least, I'm going to click over and I'm going to have the competency assessment. And you'll see here that this is, again, a repetition of the competency instructions. This time it'll have the materials that I'm supposed to review. I'll see the rubric again. And I've actually already made 2 assessments here, so let me start the 2 attempts here. Oh, and I passed it as Doug the student. I think I can do another attempt, though, which would show you sort of right. So this is if I was coming to this new, or if I had not yet passed, this is the page I would land on. That page before simply showed me that, hey, you passed the assessment on your 2nd attempt. It shows me the feedback from the instructor, and it shows me that I have now mastered that assessment. But if I were coming to this fresh, or if I hadn't mastered it yet, I would see all of this material. I would have the documents that I open here, that I review those 3 designs. I'm to list the pros and cons of each, propose a design of my choice, and justify it using the learnings from the module. I can upload my file here, and I submit that answer. Okay, so I'm not going to do that right now, but instead I'm going to pop over and show you what the instructor sees, or the grader, or the mentor, whomever is looking to see how a student or multiple students have progressed. I'm going to show you the grade view first before we go into Argos as the instructor role. I have 6 students in this particular competency. 3 have graded attempts. 1 has mastered that, and 2 have not yet mastered that. Oh, I do need to push a certain grade here, and we can see how to do that. And then I have 3 students who either have not attempted, not submitted their competency file, or it simply hasn't been graded. So I'm going to come back here to content so I can get over to Argos and look into all of that. Again, opens a link in a new tab here. Takes me to the correct competency, but because I'm coming over as an instructor, I have this additional features that are really important. So to keep this demo short, I'm going to keep sort of not talk about, the curriculum in this video. There's a lot of really neat stuff here that I'd love to come back to. Not least of all is the ability to take updates if there's an error in the competency design or a typo. That can easily be applied while there are live students, which is really nice for the rolling kind of start and stop dates. You don't have that problem of it not being able to adjust. But as I said, what I really want to focus on here is looking in the student data and looking at the grading activities. So I'm going to score manually graded activities. This is giving me the indicator that there are 2 students who have submitted, whose work I have not yet graded. Excuse me, that's hanging a little bit here. I was doing a lot on this page earlier, and I think I might have started an activity and not finished it. So I think it'll load. Let's just give it one moment. There it is. Okay, so these are the two students whom I need to grade their work. What I see here is I see their submission. I can click into it. If it's a document, of course, it'll open up. Any number of type document files are allowed, and those can be constrained if you like. You can say the number of files that can be loaded. You can say the number of competency attempts, 3, 5, infinite. And what I do here after I have reviewed that attempt is, again, by clicking on the link, which I won't do right now, is I can enter feedback for the student here, and I can score that. I can give it anything between a 0 and a 1, since it's a maximum of 1. I have some cheat buttons here, quick buttons, but I don't need to do those. If I wanted to give it a 1, I would do that here. I'm gonna pop over for a moment and show you another piece of information, and that is to be able to view the past attempts and feedback for this particular student. Ideally, we want to add that here under activity details so that I don't have to go over to another link. And that would be quite easy to do. So we'll queue that up in our development cycle. But it does exist over here. So it's just a matter of bringing that page into this view as well. So I'm going to look at view all grades here. And I can look at the students whom I've already scored. So Curtis student, he submitted once. I've been working on this today. He got it mastered the first time. Doug submitted it the first time. It was a not yet. He submitted again and it was mastered. And if you recall from the grade book, it was still showing his earlier attempt, 0 out of 1. So one thing I'm going to do here, and we can check it later, is I'm going to send this grade to the LMS. So essentially updating it with the new score. But what I really wanted to show you is when I go back in to grade Michael's attempt, I can, let me see here. And this is, while I'm here, I'll pause on this. So for Doug, not only can I look at his past competency attempts, I can actually see everything he's done in the course. I can see which pages he's visited, see how many times he's accessed them, when he first visited, when he last visited. Here, he came back and did that second attempt on September 14th, 3 hours later. Hopefully that was enough time to demonstrably improve his competency assessment. I can see his current grade. But this begins to give me the story of how involved and how recently involved students have been engaging with the learning material. So you could imagine that that's really useful for an advisor who's checking up to see if a student is engaging. An advisor who wants to communicate with a student about why they may not be getting the mastery scores that they hope to achieve. It can be really good for a grader as well, who's going in there to see, well, they didn't get this particular competency, but they got these other 3. And maybe they didn't get this particular one because they didn't spend a lot of time on this telecommuting page. I can sort of drill into that and say, look, I'd really like you to redo this assignment with a focus on this page. You're really close. Spend a little time working on through these activities, or focus here. So that's really sort of the why behind, why students may be performing well or not. There may be reasons that are not student specific, that are course specific. And we're going to look at that when we look at the course maintenance data. But this again is just really the student detail data. So I wanted to, the point of what I was trying to do, sorry, before I got distracted there, is I was grading Michael's attempt. He still got a 0 out of 1, right? Because that was his first attempt. I want to go back and see what I said to him in attempt 1. And this is the page that I was saying would be really nice to have right next to where I'm entering the feedback and the grade. And that would be pretty easy to do. But I can go back here. I can see his last attempt. It looks like he added an image last time, and I let him know that it's not how he's going to succeed at this particular competency, and asked him to work through the practice problems and submit a file, but he submitted another image. So there's a disconnect there. And that's really important for me to know. I'm not going to give the same feedback. I'm going to find another way to communicate what I need to communicate to him. So back to the course overview. I've seen which files need grading. I've been able to enter scores and grades. So for Michael in particular, I'm going to go back in and say, sorry, not yet. And then we'll look over at the gradebook and we'll see that those scores are reflecting. We gave Doug a 1 and we pushed that grade to the LMS, and Michael would still be at a 0 out of 1. So again, I'm going to give this a 0. I'm going to say yet and explain why, apply score and feedback. I'm going to come over here. Do all grades. I'm going to go into Michael. He's still 0 out of 1. I can see that there are 2 attempts, both have a 0, and I wouldn't have to send it, but I can send that grade to the LMS. It's not a change. And now when I come over here and I look at grades, I'd expect to see Doug now has a 1 and Michael still has a 0. And that's what we see. So Doug's has flipped to mastered here, and Michael is still a not yet. And I haven't graded any of these other students. So that is sort of the quick view on how the instructors, the graders, the instructor type roles, the graders, the advisors can interact with the materials, drill into student attempts, see how they've been engaged in the classroom, in the competency or not, and then tailor their feedback and their communications. All right, so now I am going to come over to the, last but not least, the Argos platform. And this, I'm now in here as the role of an author. So I just want to really briefly touch on that last type of data. And that is the data that we get from aligning these practice activities to learning objectives or competencies. And I could really do a whole video on this. I'm going to go really quickly to just show you. There's data you can get if you don't want to do that alignment, but it's a really nice feature, and it in many ways enriches the data and really your understanding of how your course is supporting your competencies, your sub-competencies or not, so that those kind of maintenance moves can be made. So again, this is going to look very familiar. I just want to really show you here on the activities, the ability to add the learning objectives. And these are objectives that I've either kind of put on the whole container of the competency. I can also very simply start authoring a new objective here and add that, and that gets added with all my other ones. So this is really easy objective competency authoring. There's ways that you can create hierarchies of competencies, which are optional, but also provide some nice features that I won't go into right now. So this one is mapped here. You can map multiple learning objectives to any one activity. You can add, and then any, so many to many is what I'm trying to say. Any activity can have multiple learning objectives, and you would expect that learning objectives are applied across many practice activities. You often want to give students multiple attempts to learn that particular objective. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you first how that data is useful. So what we're looking at here is what we call the insights. And this is really insights on the performance of the learning materials in helping the students achieve the competencies. And there are 3 ways that you can look at this. You can look at this by activity. Each of those activities I've given a unique name that for me signals what it's about, what type it is, and whether it's, if I have a learning objective, which I do, about the ethical challenges of telecommuting, I want to see as a designer that I've given students at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 opportunities to practice that, which can also give me really good information about whether performance improves over, the more that they practice. So each of those is a unique activity in my course. We see the competency, right? Assessment is here. I'm going to do the reverse order of the activities here. So I haven't refreshed this in a while, but it's got a little bit of old attempts. We've had more than 3 attempts now here at that competency assessment. But what I want you to sort of notice is that this sums over not just students, but every attempt that students make. So you could see that students may go through a competency multiple times. They may go back to those learning resources. They always have the opportunity to reset a question and try it again. And so this really begins to get at, did they get it right the first time that they tried it? Did they go back to it? Did students on the aggregate, did they eventually get it correct? This is a little bit of a rating of persistence and whether really the targeted feedback is helping them do better. And then this score is relative difficulty. There's a computation for this that I won't go into right now, but you can think about it a little bit as desirable difficulties. So what I really kind of want to see is something in a maybe 50 to 70% band. And one of the areas where we'd like to do some research at scale across different learner populations with different types of educational models is, what are some of those optimal bands? You don't necessarily want a question to be so easy as this one is, that everybody, the first time they get it right. That seems like maybe the distractors aren't very good, the question's not very challenging, and that might be an area where I want to do some course maintenance. And as you see here, that's zero difficulty. It's almost saying, it's bringing no value to the students, right? It's not a good use of their time. We want competency. Part of competency is not just effective learning toward mastery, but efficient learning. We want students who know something, who are very motivated to be able to move quickly and to really get a lot of bang out of their buck for the materials that they engage with. At the same time, this one's a little concerning, right? This one is 20% correct on the first attempt, and that didn't get much better. This one's a little better. So I think that this one, maybe, even though those numbers don't look great, I'm actually pretty happy with that relative difficulty, desirable difficulty. There seems to be some learning value there. I could look at it and tweak it. This one seems a little concerning. I'm going to go look at that and see how I can change it. Now, this is a submit and compare, and this is going to function a little bit on how I set those up. So again, we decided not to talk about that in this particular video, but that's something that we could explore further. But this is kind of data on your practice opportunities. And you begin to see here as well whether these in aggregate are really supporting the ultimate goal, which is getting that competency assessment file upload. That is the competency assessment that gets manually scored. And that is where we want to see a good sort of first try correct might be lower. That wouldn't be unexpected, but eventually correct higher. And I would expect, as we get more attempts here, this is only showing 3 submissions, that number is going to shake out a little bit how we want it to progress. So you can look at this by activity. You can look at it by page. Some of these are from the later units where we really haven't focused. This was really that competency 1. And you can look at an aggregate of all of the activities on that page. So again, that gives you some really good information about the page as a whole. And then you can look at by objective. And this is where sort of putting those objectives, attaching those to the practice problems gets really powerful. So I am sort of getting a very quick snapshot here that maybe this particular learning objective is not well supported. So first try correct is pretty low, eventually correct is pretty low, and the relative difficulty is getting pretty high. So this would be another really good place. If this is really critical to my competency assessment, I might want to do some tweaking here. It even shows, look, that students are not engaging as much. So it might be a motivation problem, it might be a materials problem, a question problem. And it also gives me the opportunity as the competency designer to say, is this really critical to what I'm asking them to do? Let's say that I have a really sort of high difficulty, low eventual correct, low first try attempt on this, and yet students are doing very well on the competency and the competency assessment by and large, they're succeeding. That gives me the opportunity to really evaluate here, is this as critical as I thought it was? Do I want to reduce the prevalence of these particular, maybe less material on this in my course, because the students are not getting it as well as I'd hope, and yet they seem to be doing well on the competency. So really there's a lot of ways that you can look at this and fine tune your competency to help more students succeed more efficiently, earlier in their attempts. Okay, and then last but not least, I want to show you another design tool, and I'm going to come over here to review. Hopefully I'm still logged in. I've been logged in for a while. Great. Okay, and this is what we colloquially call the checkers. This you can run as many times as you'd like before your first student is even in there. It's really looking at the design of the course according to good learning design, learning science principles. And those can extend to, for example, accessibility. When I set this up, I forgot to add alt text to 4 of my images and or videos. And that is, very helpful for folks who are using a screen reader to be able to sort of know what they're about to open before they choose to open it or before they choose to access it, or if they can't see it. And so either I can say, look, there's a good reason for that and dismiss it, or I can jump right over there and I can fix that problem. More than likely on the accessibility items, it's just something I forgot to do. These broken and remote resources, I left these on purpose. These were video links in the OpenStacks that I didn't convert to our, have open up on the page as a YouTube that displays inline on the page. That was very easy to do, but I wanted to leave a few undone so that you can see that sort of checks that for you. And then here is the last kind of checker, and that is really showing that I haven't aligned. I have some pages where I haven't aligned learning objectives or competencies, or I have some objectives that I don't have attached to any activities. I don't think that's the case, but I think here these are pages where I haven't added any learning objectives, and this is an activity where I haven't added any learning objectives. Because I think I did a pretty good job of making sure that each of my learning objectives were attached to activities. So again, same thing. I can jump right there, go to the page and fix that. And, I ran this yesterday, but let's say I have somebody else come in here, a collaborator, they do a bunch of work, they want to run it again, I make some changes, I want to run it again. It's just a really nice way to make sure that my course is meeting certain quality standards. And this is an area that's really where we can really take this in a lot of fun and meaningful directions to continue to build on what's being checked and even the diversity of the type of checkers that are being run. So with that, I probably went way over my time. I am going to stop the video here and look forward to discussing this and more when we meet face to face. Thank you so much for your time.